let's just take a minute here to say, hey, Happy New Year, all right? Today is Chinese New Year. Y'all perhaps know that the Chinese calendar is based on the movements of the moon rather than the movements of the sun. And therefore, the date of Chinese New Year floats on our Western calendar. So this year it's February 1st. It's always somewhere late January, early February, but around that. Here we see that it is a large celebration, as much as 16 days. But look at this. In China, people get 7 days off of work for this holiday. It is the largest journey migration of humans in the world. It's nutso. In China, they've got like 1.5 billion people or something like that. By far, the majority of people in China live in the interior of China and live in incredible poverty, extreme poverty, with no opportunities for anything. Well, it turns out that all of the industry in China, and there's a lot of factories in China, are all on the East Coast. And so there are billions of, no, maybe not billions, I mean, hundreds of millions of Chinese people that whose hometowns are in central China, but they live and work on the east coast of China in some pretty brutal conditions, which I'm not going to get into today. But I mean, almost slave-like prison complexes. But this one time during the year, every factory shuts down for this time period, and all of these workers, just hundreds of millions of workers, travel across the country. And in many cases, it's like a 3 day train trip, one direction. 3 days of trains, 3 days of trains back. But they do it every single year. It is a major holiday, not just in China, but in Korea, in I believe Vietnam, Thailand, the entire Asia celebrates this New Year, and so including in my home, because of course, as I told you, my wife is Korean. So just this morning, for breakfast, I had to have dakguk. Dakguk is a traditional soup made out of rice cake is the biggest ingredient, but she put in a little bit of meat in there. She put some egg drop in there, like dropped egg in there, and scallions in there. She spiced it up a little bit. And this dakguk is a traditional food to like welcome the new year. And without it, your new year didn't start, right? So January 1st, I had dakguk. Of course I did. But now all of a sudden, February 1st, I got to do it again, right? No, I just figured out this one right here. Washing hair or clothing is not allowed on this day because you're washing away your good luck or your fortune. And I asked my wife about this, and she says, "No, that is definitely a Chinese thing, not the way the Koreans view it." So I was like, "Okay, interesting, interesting." And I like this one. This is a day when families get together, big gatherings, whole family. We got that call yesterday because, of course, Asia is on a different time zone than we are. So we got that call yesterday from her family. We get this one every single year on Chinese New Year, where they all got together and they all call us, and then so yeehaw. Well, when the families all get together, the adults are supposed to provide gifts. Where's my mouse? Supposed to provide gifts for children, gifts in the form of cash, all right, significant cash in some cases. And traditionally, it's given in these little red envelopes, right? Slip the kids cash, the kids bow, they show their respect, you pay them for it. Yeah, it's a cute little tradition, okay? So even if you didn't know it was Chinese New Year, it is by far the largest holiday on the planet. There is no other holiday. I mean, Christmas ain't nothing. I mean, come on. What holiday do we have where we shut down for 7 days? Okay. I was in Korea one time on Christmas Day, and it was just a regular day. They just went to work, the kids went to school, nothing. So 7 days off, nothing for Christmas. So all right. So today, what we're going to do is very important topic, but admittedly not the most exciting topic. Okay. So it is what it is, and it's done in one day, one shot. But what this means, because I'm condensing it to get it out of here, all right, that means that all of a sudden, even though you just did a quiz and a discussion post last night, guess what's due tomorrow night? Oh crap. Chapter 2 quiz, chapter 3 discussion post. All right. So let's get them done. I know they're a pain in the ass, but they're really not that much work. In order for you to get 3 credits toward the college diploma, which is a really big deal, it's really not that much work. So, all right, so let's start it up, and I'm gonna briefly talk about why we do research, different kind of ways to approach it, kind of like how we analyze it, and briefly ethics, just touch on it a little bit. Okay. So the father of science was Francis Bacon, and I think I talked about him last week. He takes the philosophies of empiricism and rationalism, and he blends them together, and he makes science. Okay? And so a lot of people, when they see the results of psychological research in particular, they say, "Oh, that was so obvious. Of course, I knew that. Of course." Well, we call that hindsight bias. Okay, that everything seems obvious once it happens. It's like, of course, we should have been able to predict 9/11 was going to happen. I mean, come on, look at it. Look at all the things. Or every time the stock market crashes, they go, "Oh, of course it crashed. Look at all of the red flags that were leading up to it." If you saw it happening, why didn't you tell me to get my money out, dude? All right? Don't tell me it was obvious after the fact. It doesn't help me at all. Okay? So it's research that makes the difference between a fact and an opinion and a fact. That's it. That's it. A fact is something backed up by science, and opinion is a personal judgment. Okay? So, yeah. Okay. We need science not just because of this notion of a hindsight bias that it seems so obvious when we're done, but because of overconfidence. Overconfidence is like, we always overestimate how good we're going to be, okay? How fast we're going to be, how, oh, it just doesn't matter how much we can do, how we are also overconfident in how accurate we are. This is powerful. I mean, like here on the left side, predicting this performance, they asked. In fact, they found students that were working on a PhD, and they said, "How long do you think it's going to take you to finish your dissertation?" And they go, "Oh, 30 days, 30 days." What's the absolute worst possible situation you could imagine? How long would it take? Oh, 60 days. On average, it was like 120 days. So people thought they were going to do it in 30. 60 seemed to be the most obnoxious thing they could imagine, and 120 was the truth. Over here, overconfidence. And this is like, we believe that we're correct about things. In a bunch of different research studies they've done, they ask people things like, "What's the capital of North Dakota?" And you're like, "Bismarck, I think." Bismarck. Okay. So they just asked a whole bunch of these questions about just general facts. And then after that, they asked for each question, "How confident are you that you are correct with that answer?" Okay. And so it was like when people said, "I'm 100% confident that I'm right," they're correct about 90% of the time. When people go, "Oh, I'm 99% sure that that's the correct answer," they're correct like 70% of the time. Right? There's a pretty big disconnect between what we believe and the truth. And that's why we have to have science is to find the truth, because our opinions are wrong, flat out wrong. Okay? We also, we as human beings, and this is a natural tendency, we tend to make mistakes, like and we're going to talk about some of this stuff later, but we see order. There's some random events. Oh, I flipped a coin and 5 times in a row it was heads. Ooh, it must be a rigged coin. And it's like, no, that's just how things happen. You know, oh, this guy got a pair of aces, 2 hands in a row. He must be cheating. No, that's just how it happens. Okay. So we tend to be bad judges of how things work. Or even another one is we tend to be highly, highly influenced by the most recent things that have happened. Okay. So, oh, there was just a highly publicized, news story about a kidnapping. So, oh my God, I think kidnappings are incredibly common now. No, it was just something that was recent, something that was on the news. That doesn't make it more common than it was yesterday. It didn't change it. So we have to have science to give us the facts. Our judgments are terrible. Okay? So, in order to do scientific research, we really have to have certain characteristics, or perhaps a good scientist will have some very specific characteristics, okay, including curiosity. Right? Curiosity is at the core of all science. Without curiosity, people wouldn't even be asking these questions. I wonder what would happen if, okay? Or here, curiosity, if not guided by caution, can lead to whatever, okay? So, got to have curiosity. But we also need to be a good scientist. We need to have skepticism. Okay, skepticism is a huge deal, and that is we always have to be skeptical. Now, I read one research study one time, and it was fascinating. Actually, it was a series of studies, and they were talking about a scientific study about the effectiveness of prayer, right? So what they did was they took patients in hospitals, right? And then they took their names and they brought them over to some churches, all right? And they got some prayer groups. And they had the prayer groups pray for certain people and not pray for others. And then they measured some different health outcomes, like how many days to be discharged, etc. And they found, oh, those people in the hospital that are prayed for have better outcomes. They get healthier and get out of the hospital. Now, I, as a skeptical scientist, I'm like, I don't know about that. There's a lot of reasons why you could have found what you just found, and the prayer. But at the same time, that skepticism needs to be healthy, and this is a real problem we're having in politics in the United States. 97% of climate scientists agree the reason we have climate change is humans are doing it. Okay. So, yeah, I got it. If 97% say it, then there's still a little bit of room, a wiggle room here. But, dude, 97%. And so what you find is crazy policies in America where, oh, we need to teach both sides of the issue. Both sides of the 97% say it's true. Oh my God. So what? One problem in science is you can never prove anything. All right. This is for definitely not for a general psych class. But the fact is you can't prove anything. That is just the nature of science. And because you can never prove anything, there's always room for skepticism. And so you find you can't prove evolution is true, but you can lay out so much. Yeah, but you didn't prove it. Oh my God. How much evidence do you need? I'm 99% certain, 99.9, doesn't matter. A third necessary attitude, for a lack of a better word here, would be humility. And that is that sometimes when you go out and you observe the world, it doesn't support your beliefs. It may reject your theories. You have to be ready for that, okay? The truth is what the truth is, whether it's a popular opinion or a not a popular opinion, whether it is what you believe or not believe, it is the truth, okay? So, pretty cool to be a scientist, you got to do these things. But now, some of these images that I'm going to put out here ought to look kind of familiar to you because I mean, science is science. It doesn't matter if we're talking about biology as a science, psychology as a science, chemistry as a science. You're going to be using pretty much the same principles and procedures. The scientific method is a scientific method. Okay. So here's an overview of the scientific method. So in the scientific method, what's going to happen is we're going to make some observations, okay? and we're going to see things, right? I was out there, I saw some people, they were behaving in this way. I'm going to get some questions. I wonder what is happening. Why do these human beings act this way? Why do they do these things? I'm going to create a hypothesis. In fact, here, how about this? So let's say, for example, I give back exams in a class. Okay, I give back exams. And after I give back these exams, some people got high grades on the exam and some didn't. And you know what I noticed? I was just making some observations. I noticed that when a student got a high grade on the exam, then they were nicer people, right? They were holding the door for people behind them, something like this, so they were happy and everything. So maybe I might create a hypothesis. After these observations, I might be like, I have this hypothesis that if people are happy, then they're helpful. There's a hypothesis. If then, if people are happy, then they will be helpful. So I'm going to take this hypothesis and turn it into a testable prediction. And this is definitely a research methods thing. But I'm going to design an experiment to test this hypothesis. So perhaps I'll do something like I'll take two groups of people, and one of them, what I'll do is I'll have them do a task, and then it's a difficult task, and maybe I'll tell them you did poorly on the task. And then a second group, what might happen is I'll do a task, and then I'll tell them, oh, you did a great job. Here's some money. Take some money for it. Good job. So I took one group of people, I put them in a bad mood, and the second group of people, I put them in a good mood. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll create a situation where as they're leaving my research study, maybe somebody in the hallway is kind of walking, and they'll kind of stumble and drop a huge pile of papers on the floor, right? A whole bunch of papers. And then what I might do is I might measure how many pieces of paper that they help pick up. Okay. So all of a sudden, what I've done is I've created a situation where, one group of people is happy, one group of people is unhappy. I give them all an opportunity to help. So I then predict if I put them in a good mood by paying them, then they will pick up more paper, right? So if happy, then helpful. If I pay them money, then they will pick up more paper. What's going to happen is that I gather my data. In this case, the data is literally number of pieces of paper picked up. I use this data to develop a theory. A theory is an explanation for what I've just observed, a tentative explanation. Mood influences helpfulness. Nice, okay? And so, of course, this theory will then allow me to test it again, okay? So I like it. So it's self-correcting. So science is self-correcting. That's a big deal right there. Big deal. So different ways that we might look at research, okay? Observation. I should always just do this because I like to highlight stuff. You know what I mean? I like to touch them and point at them. So observational research allows us to describe stuff. And I'll briefly describe a couple of these different procedures for observational work. Correlational studies allow us to predict things. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that. Experiments, on the other hand, allow us to understand the world and even better control the world, right? Experiments are the only thing that allow us to say, to establish the causal laws. A causes B, something of that nature. And because if you perform an experiment and you have in fact established A causes B, all right, here's the deal. If B is good, I like B. B is a good thing. I don't know. That's a good outcome. Do you know how you can make this thing happen? Turn on A. If A causes B and you like B, turn on A. B is a bad thing. I do not like B. This is juvenile delinquency or something like that. You don't like this. You would like to eliminate this, and A causes B. Get rid of A. All right? So pretty straightforward. And so the experiments which allow us to create causal statements allow us to control the world and make the world a better place. All right? That's really what that's all about. Okay? Very cool idea. So briefly, because descriptive research ain't my thing. My actual diploma is in experimental psychology. So when it comes to research methodology, I'm pretty biased. All right, I am clearly an experimentalist. But what we find is that descriptive research is research where you, the researcher, don't you just go out and look. Basically, it's all you do. You go out and you look at the world, which is, I guess, it's kind of what Aristotle did. Just go out and look. Okay, and so a case study is a form of descriptive research where you're going to take an individual person and study them in huge depth. See, here's a very, very famous case in psychology. The guy's name was Phineas Gage, and he was working on a railroad, and they had dynamite, and he had to tamp it down with this big metal rod, explode, boom! This rod shot up through his head. Okay, now he survived, right? In fact, it was crazy because it was like 10 minutes and he's up and walking. Okay. And afterward, there was some real noticeable changes to his personality, to his character. He was just a different guy, you know. Before the accident, he was the foreman. He was in charge of the crew. He was responsible. Afterward, he was real impulsive. He couldn't, control his impulses. He could no longer be in charge, and it just all kinds of changes occurred. And so people have studied Phineas Gage for many years to help to understand how the different areas of the brain that were damaged in this accident might impact the different characteristics and changes that occurred to his personality. Okay. So there is, it's an interesting design, but you got to be careful. Okay. So what happens is that you are learning something about one human being, Phineas Gage. Is what you have learned about Phineas Gage true of other human beings? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay. And this is one of the main reasons later on I'm going to be telling you repeatedly Sigmund Freud is full of shit. And one of the main reasons Sigmund Freud is full of shit is he did case studies like this. He studied rich women in Vienna, Austria in the late 1800s, and he developed some general theories of human behavior, and he tries to describe every human being on the planet after having studied rich women in Austria. It's like, are you a rich Austrian woman? Probably not, okay? So I got a lot of problems with Freud. Oh, don't get me started on Freud. Naturalistic observation is to go out and just observe natural behaviors, just to figure out what's happening. Some of the most famous naturalistic observation was like Jane Goodall, right? And she went down to Africa and she studied chimpanzees because she wanted to study chimpanzees. And then she went to the zoo in London and realized very quickly that the monkeys, the chimpanzees rather, in the zoo were just doing weird things because they're in a zoo, you know? So she wanted to figure out how chimpanzees actually behave. So she goes to Africa and literally sits and watches them. Okay, so okay, that makes a lot of sense. You want to understand children and children's behavior? Look at this. They've got a research design with a one-way mirror. Okay, so the children in this room do not know they're being observed, but you can check them out, look at social interactions, whatever it is you're trying to do. Okay. Here, I love this one. This one is an observational study, but it was instead of observing an individual child or something like that, somebody went and looked at Twitter posts. Okay, now I don't do no Twitter, but they looked at Twitter posts and they analyzed how positive each post was, and then what they are here the number of positive words in the posts. That's what it is. And so they tracked it based on day of week and time of day, and they found that human moods really were dependent upon, look at this, the worst day of the week, Tuesday at, what is that, 4 p.m. Tuesday at 4 p.m. is the worst time. That is the lowest point. And the highest point was Saturday night, right? When people are, a little imbibing a little bit, get a little drunk and I'm happy. So it's just a pretty cool observation. I like that one. A survey, on the other hand, and I'm certain that you guys have taken surveys. With a survey, it's just like descriptive research, But you see what's happening is this person here is observing this person here. With a survey, it's you observing yourself. That's it. You're just observing yourself and reporting on yourself. Okay. And so we find that surveys are relatively cheap. They're a quick way to gather a large amount of information. Okay. So very fast, but you got to be careful about wording. Wording is huge. They could ask people in a survey, they could say, do you think the government should control what goes on television? And like 75, 80% of Americans say, yes, of course, the federal government should control what goes on television. Then you ask a second question. Should the US government censor television? And people go, oh, hell no, you don't censor things. That's terrible. Wait a minute. So the government should control what goes on television, but they should not censor it. Okay. I don't know what's going on with that one. Okay. So you got to be careful what words you use. You can get a radically different opinion. And I mean, you got to be careful, especially during political season when they keep giving you, oh, this many people responded this way. If you put me in charge of creating the survey, just just tell me what outcome would you like to see, and I will phrase the question, and I will get anything you want from it. Okay, it's not right. Okay. Here, however, is a very interesting one. This was after the 1948 presidential election. So it was Harry Truman, who we see here, who was running against Thomas Dewey. Now, Harry Truman was a Democrat and Thomas Dewey was a Republican. And so before the election, the Chicago Tribune, what they did was they called people on the telephone and they asked them various questions about the election, including who are you going to vote for? Okay. And so what happened was they took a sample of people and they got their opinions. And what they gathered was based on what we heard here, they literally published this paper on election day. This is what they published. Here is Harry Truman the day after the election, after he won, holding up this paper. What happened was they did this interview on a telephone. In 1948, a telephone was a luxury item. Okay, it was not common. And therefore, the only people that owned telephones would be rich people. So the Chicago Tribune literally went out and asked a bunch of rich people, who are you going to vote for? And a bunch of rich people said, the Republican. Wow, what a surprise. Rich people saying they'll vote for a Republican. Ain't a shock, okay? And so all of a sudden, what happened was they did it, they sampled, but it was not a random sample, okay? And so Dewey defeats Truman if only people rich enough to own telephones were allowed to vote. All right, now that is a headline I would jump on board with, but everybody is allowed to vote, even if you can't afford a telephone. Huh? Oh, yeah, leave that alone. All right, so research is, I love research. I mean, when I first started in psychology, I wanted to become a professor, right? I had that goal for a long time. And when I went, what I came to realize as I went through my undergraduate degree was that in order to become a professor, because I wanted to teach, because I had been a tutor for algebra, and I was really good at it, and I really enjoyed that. And so I was going to be a teacher, but I wanted to be a professor teacher. But in order to be down that kind of a track, that kind of education, you got to do research. And at first I was like, oh God, I'm doing this research because I have to do this research. But I've come to really love research. I love discovering things that nobody else has ever seen. I mean, I'm always doing different studies to discover new findings. I mean, right now I'm doing two different projects. One student that wants to go into occupational therapy. He's studying to go into occupational therapy. And he says a lot of the patients that really should continue with their therapy drop out of therapy. So we're designing a research study to try to figure out why people that really should be completing their physical therapy, why they stop their therapy. What reasons are there? So we're going to be exploring, why do people make this bad decision, right? I'm doing another study right now where we're wanting to explore because the student that I'm working with, she wants to go into marketing, and so we're exploring how the value of a commodity is changes with time. So especially here right now, because we're having these supply chain issues, and so what is the value of a new I don't know, a new appliance for your kitchen if you can walk right over to the store and pick it up and buy it and bring it home? What about if it's on back order for 2 weeks? How much would you be willing to pay for that appliance? Because you can't have it right now. You can't have it for 2 weeks. So what are you going to do? And so we're going to look at how the delay to a product is decreasing its value. So pretty cool stuff. I mean, that's just the two that I'm whittling at the exact moment. So what we find in research, in fact, yeah, here I'll run this one. Okay, so here is a method for gathering data or a way of exploring correlations. Correlations are a number that represents how closely two different things resemble each other, how much they're similar to each other. So we see a couple of simple ones here. If I measure people's height and I measure how big their shoe size is, I get an awfully strong relationship because as the height gets as somebody's height gets larger, their shoe size tends to get larger. It's a pretty powerful relationship. Okay. Here is another pretty powerful relationship. The number of years somebody has spent in school and the number of years that somebody has spent in jail. Right? It's very strong and it is very negative. That is, as people tend to have more education, they tend to spend less time in jail. Tend, very powerful. Here's one that's pretty much non-existent. If I wanted to study the relationship between how tall somebody is and how smart they are, you're going to find nothing. There is no relationship, all right? Just nothing there. So these are some extremes, okay? So with a positive correlation, it could be represented like this, okay? So if this would be a perfect kind of a freaky weird correlation between here's a better one. This is a more realistic. How tall somebody is, how much they weigh. And so as a rule, we can see that it's kind of a linear shape here, right? As you get taller, you tend to weigh more, 10, 10. There's always going to be, this person here anyway, all kinds of. Here would be a perfect positive correlation. It's kind of stupid, right? Because if I measured your height in inches and then I measured you again in centimeters, it would be a 100% perfect, right? Now, most of the time, this is much more realistic, right? This is a kind of relationship. So take a look at some other ones that might appear a lot in psychology: age and job satisfaction. The older you get, there is a tendency for you to be more satisfied with your job. Now, there's always exceptions, all right? The one I always think of is the older people that are greeters at Walmart. I cannot imagine an old person working as a greeter at Walmart will be satisfied with their job. But as a rule, look at this. Salary and years of education. The more years of education you have, the more money you tend to make. All right, I got to say tend every time because there's a tendency. Look at this: parents' IQ and children's IQ. The higher the intelligence of a parent tends to have a higher intelligence of a child. Okay? And so there's a lot of different, achievement, motivation, and grades. As one goes up, the other goes up. Okay? So positive correlations explain a lot of relations. Not all. Okay. Here's a negative correlation. Let me draw a negative correlation. No, here. Yeah, this isn't bad right here. Look at this one just to see it. This is negative. As hours of sleep increase, wait, no, as hours of sleep well, how am I say this? As hours of sleep are smaller, tiredness is larger. So as one goes up, the other comes down, right? So with a positive, they both go up, they both go down. With a negative, it's just one up, one down. That's what I'm trying to do. However, this is favorite. This is why I became a psych major. Okay? I was a computer science major before when I started in college. I was comp sci. And I switched over to psychology because I sat in my general psych class and Dr. McCann was teaching, Dr. McCann, and he taught us about negative correlations. And this is the example he used. This is the example he used, right? It goes like this, that there is a negative relationship between the row you sit in a class. We're going to collaborate remote. So I don't have really, okay, whatever. Face to face. As the row increases, the grade decreases. That is, if you're sitting in the front row, you tend to have high grades. Second row, third, fourth. So as the row in the class gets larger, the grades get smaller. Tend to. Okay? There's always going to be somebody out there. And that was me. So I hear about this one. I'm sitting in this big lecture hall, like 200 students or more, right? And this is how the classroom is set up, right? Up here's Professor Dr. McCann's up here giving class. And so then they had these weird kind of triangle sort of things. But you see, by the time it gets to this back triangle, that's the last row, right? The highest row, like row 18 or something. And there's one seat in that row, a single seat. And here I am. Look at me. That's me. Look at that haircut, too. Isn't that awesome? It's my I think that's my high school junior picture. So it's a little dated, but gives you the idea. And I'm sitting in the very last seat, the last seat in that row. And I'm like a sophomore in college at this point. I'm like, wait a minute. Is he's saying, wait, he's saying I'm gonna have a negative 47 in his class and I'm gonna fail ultra miserably? I'm like, oh, bullshit. There is no way this old man is going to tell me I'm going to fail. All right. I took it as my personal, I'm going to prove he's wrong. Okay. So what I did was every day I came in 20 minutes early to guarantee I would get this seat. I sat in this sucker every day, but I studied and I studied. And I'll tell you what, I finished that class with like 115%. I took every opportunity, every single thing. And at the end of the class, I'm like, in your face, old man, in your face. I'm right, you're wrong, okay? You just are so stupid. But remember, I kept saying every single time you talk about correlations, you have to say tendency. And so here is that relationship. As row in class increases, GPA decreases. But check it out. That's me. Okay. I sat in the very last row and had the highest grade in the class. Now, guess what? Dr. McCann was still right. Okay. There is a tendency. My defiance in creating that data point did not in any way, shape, or form change the tendency of the class. Right. So I like that. And I came to respect Dr. McCann a lot. He became my thesis advisor. He advised me when I did my master's degree research. So I like it. I like it. Okay. But the key is this is tendency. Correlation does not imply causation. Just because there is a relationship between two things does not mean that one caused the other. It just doesn't. Okay. And so here is a statement. There is a relationship between self-esteem and depression. And it goes like this. If you have low self-esteem, I predict you will be exhibiting symptoms of depression. If you are exhibiting symptoms of depression, I predict that you will have low self-esteem. Okay, cool. And guess what? I'll be pretty good. It will tend to be a true statement. Tend to be. However, think about it. It's possible that if you have low self-esteem, that could in fact cause you to feel depression. And if you have depression, that could easily cause low self-esteem, maybe. Or maybe distressing things in your life are causing both of these things. Maybe. And so the problem is, as a statement of fact, if you have low self-esteem, there is a tendency to exhibit symptoms of depression. Now, I have no idea why that's true. I just know it is true. Okay. So we have to be careful that we do not take correlational findings and try to tack on a causal connection. One of my favorite ones, there is a very strong correlation between the number of churches in a city and the amount of violent crime. Therefore, churches cause crime. Love it. Churches cause crime. No, silly. Instead, the size of the population of a city influences both crime and number of churches. Large cities have both lots of crime and lots of churches. Okay, so I mean, it is what it is. But if all you want to do is predict something, I had one guy, and in fact, this is some interesting stuff. I had one guy in college. He figured out that there was some relationships, some correlations between performance of different measures on the stock market and different positions of planets, planetary positions. And so he was going through all kinds of old books, and when will different moon be in this phase and that phase, and different historically what happened. And it just turned out, it's like when Venus is in alignment with Mars, then pork futures are up in the past. Okay, so now he just waits until Venus is in alignment with Mars, and then he says, I'm going to put my money into the pork futures before that happens, and give me some money, buddy. Okay. And it works. It absolutely works. All right. Now ask him, why is that true? He said, I don't give a crap. I mean, I just wanted my money, right? And unfortunately, that's what has happened to our so much of our economy, is that these stock traders, they have no idea why they're making the trades they do. It's all based on this kind of correlational crap like this. If this is true, then in the past that was true. And now what they have is they have supercomputers that can look for these stupid little relationships. Nobody on the planet has any idea why these things are true. They just know they are true. And so it's really problematic, actually, because some of the biggest computers on the planet, like IBM's Watson is one of the big famous ones. It is incredibly expensive to be able to access the IBM Watson. You have to have a lot of money to access that thing. But the people with a lot of money are accessing that thing, and they're using this supercomputer to discover all these stupid relationships that allow them to make even more money. All right. You have to have $1 billion to rent time on the machine that allows you to earn $2 billion. Yeah, that's a game we ain't gonna win. All right. You will not win that game. All right. Cool. Now, as I said, if you want to establish cause, it is an experiment that allows it to happen. Okay. So we find in true experiments, we're going to manipulate something and measure another thing. Or more to the point, we manipulate independent variables and measure dependent variables, right? So independent variables are the ones that we manipulate. Dependent variables are the ones that we measure, and confounds are things that we fail to control. So, for example, an independent variable, which one did we say earlier? I can't even remember what we said. We didn't say one, so we'll have to stick with one. Here, let's try an actual question. Okay, so it might seem relatively obvious, but until somebody did the experiment about it, you don't know. Does consumption of alcohol impair driving ability? So what I might do is I might manipulate alcohol consumption. Okay. And so half of the participants that come into my study will be given alcohol, and half of the participants come into the study will not be given alcohol. Okay, cool. So what's going to happen? I'm going to give the people in the experimental group or condition 6 cans of beer, right? Give them some Bud. The control condition, 6 cans of non-alcoholic beer. So it looks the same, it tastes the same, but it doesn't have any alcohol. Yeah? Now, what I'm going to measure is driving ability, right? Because that was the question. So obviously you can't be sticking drunk people on the road, right? Because that's gotta have some ethics, right? Some ethics. So we'll make like a driving simulator or something like this, Mario Kart. Okay. And so maybe what you would do is you might measure, because what do you mean driving ability? That's pretty vague. What does that mean? The number of speeding tickets you got? I don't understand. Number of accidents you've had. So we're going to define it. In this case, the number of times the tires leave the road. If you ever play Mario Kart, you'll know that sucker is crazy, man. You can't really stay on the road. So maybe I'm going to measure something like that, some way to quantify. Because when I said driving ability, it's too vague. You can't what is driving? I don't know driving ability. Aha, I quantified it. Number of times tires leave road. All right, sweet. So given this, at the end, I could then, depending on my results, be able to say consumption of alcohol causes an impairment in driving ability. Until I've done this research study, you cannot use the word cause. You do not know. Okay. We find that for many, 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 many years, way before your lifetimes, most of you, I think, there was very strong evidence showing that smoking and lung cancer, right? People were smoking and then comes the lung cancer. And for a lot of years, there was people that were going to the tobacco company saying, hey, this is your product, you're killing people. And the tobacco company say, you can't prove that. Well, what? No, you cannot prove that smoking causes lung cancer in humans. Because in order to prove that smoking causes lung cancer in humans, you would have to do an experiment. You would have to randomly assign half of the people to smoke and randomly assign half of the people not to smoke. That doesn't sound like an ethical study. You can't ethically randomly assign people to do something that you believe is going to kill them, right? You just can't. And because of that, says the tobacco company, since you did not, in fact, run a controlled experiment, you cannot prove that smoking causes lung cancer, and you can't force us to put a warning label on our packages. All right. Well, how much circumstantial evidence do you need before you can say smoking and lung cancer are related? Okay. Because you know what? In other studies, you can, and they have, in fact, proved that smoking causes lung cancer in rats. Smoking causes lung cancer in monkeys. Smoking causes lung cancer but not with humans because it's not ethical to force a human to smoke. Lovely. Here was another one that was pretty interesting. When my wife was pregnant with her first child, we were living in Long Island, and we only had one car, and so I had to somehow get out of work every time for every single visit to the doctor while she was pregnant, and there was a lot of them, checkups and appointments, and a lot of them. And I still remember at the obstetrician's office, the baby doctor's office, they had signs all over the wall, and it was like, they were just emphasizing how important breast milk is for a child, and how if it got to the point where it was like making women feel incredibly guilty. It's like if I didn't breastfeed, then I failed or something like that. Because they're just, here's a statement. This is a statement. It is a factual statement. There is a correlation between the amount of breast milk a baby consumes and the intelligence of that child at age 8. Absolutely. The more breast milk, the smarter the kid. Okay? Fact. That is a statement of fact. But what was happening is we now are sophisticated, and we know just because there's a correlation doesn't mean it's a cause. And so what happens is that these posters were pushing it as though it's a cause. And so what happened was some researchers did a controlled experiment. All right. What they said was, okay, we are going to randomly assign babies to consume either breast milk or formula. Okay. So they approached some women that were pregnant and said, we're designing this research study. Do you volunteer to join this study, regardless of which group? And so what happened was all babies were fed either breast milk or formula, and they were fed, here, breast milk or formula. And in each case, they were fed from the same glass bottles, right? They provided them with the exact same bottles. They gave them instructions for how do you hold your baby when you're feeding them. I mean, everything. So that these babies are exposed, every single thing about these babies is the same, except half get breast milk, half get formula. When they measured their intelligence score at age 8, there was no difference, none at all. So all of a sudden, breast milk causes intelligence is just blown away. Okay. So as a skeptical scientist, I go back and I look at the results. And the fact is, when I go out there, the more breast milk a baby consumes, the higher their intelligence. It's a statement. And it turns out it's like this. Um, Especially here in the 21st century, that a lot of women, especially women in poor families, or less well-off families, they have to work. And if you have to go out to a job, you can't be breastfeeding a baby. How can you? You have to be using formula for all. I mean, there's options, but realistically. And so what happens is those babies that tend to be fed formula tend to come from homes without a lot of resources. A lot of resources, guess what happens if they have the ability, if mamas have the ability to stay home and don't have to get a job? That also means that they can take them out to museums. They can take them to mommy and me classes, right? In, but the group that tends to get formula also tends to go to daycare. You know what happens in daycare? They just put up babies in a crib and just make sure they don't die. That's about it in daycare. Okay. So all of a sudden, what's happening is that those babies that are fed breast milk tend to come from families with more money, tend to have lots of opportunities, tend to be put into, summer camps and dance classes and yada, yada, yada. And so that the reason that they have higher intelligence at age 8 is probably not because of the breast milk, but because they were raised in a home that had lots of resources. Okay. All right. That's a good one. I like that one. Good study. Good study. Okay. So, what happens in science, we often want to know global truths, big truths. You know, maybe you want to know, is there, do people that drive red cars, do they drive faster? People with red cars, do they drive faster? Because the insurance company charges you more money if you have a red car. Do you know that? Your insurance goes up with a red car. So is it true? Well, okay, you want to know if people that own red cars drive faster. You can't ask that. How could you ask that? You know how many millions and millions of red cars there are in America alone, not counting the rest of the world? How are you possibly going to answer that question? You're not. It's impossible. It's just you can't access it. Instead, you're going to draw a sample of people that drive red cars and a sample of people that drive other colored cars and measure how fast they drive. And you're going to calculate what we call a descriptive statistic. You are going to describe those people that drive red cars, describe those people that drive other cars, and then you're going to use inferential statistics. You're going to infer, I have described this sample, but I would like to infer about all people around the world that drive red cars. Okay? And that's what statistics is really about. You describe samples, use the information from a sample to make the best guess you can about some unknown larger population. Okay? That's basically what stats is. So stats is awesome, by the way. Just thought I'd let you know. So when can we make this leap? Okay, when can we make this sample to population generalization? It's better to have more in a larger sample. So if you looked at a sample of 3 people that drive red cars, after seeing 3 people driving, you have no business making global statements about people who drive our cars. You can't. Okay? Obviously, representative samples are important. Remember Dewey versus Truman, right? And yada yada yada. Okay. So what else was there? Oh, this is again part of statistics, and this is part of the prove thing. And so what happens as a general rule in research is that we allow for a 5% margin of error because you can't prove anything. You can never prove anything. It's absolutely impossible to prove. In fact, I got a minute. Let me tell you another good story for you. I grew up in Wisconsin, and up in Wisconsin, we got deer. We got so many freaking deer. Everywhere is deer. And what happens up in Wisconsin is we also have harsh winters. And so what'll happen with deer if you're not careful is during the summer, they're all fat and happy, and you got millions and billions of deer. And then what happens is in November, the snow starts to fall, and all these billions of deer are eating. And December, and all of these billions of deer are eating. And then you get to January, and there's no food left. And you have an absolute massive death of deer. And that was how it works up in Wisconsin. It was just these huge just leaps in population, just absolute crash. And then it would be 10 years before you had another growth in the, it was just woo, 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 woo. And so what happens is they create laws where they want to estimate how harsh winter is going to be. They want to estimate how many deer will be able to live through the winter, right? How many will survive, or how many, based on how much food will be available, how many would be able to survive. And then they start to issue hunting licenses to control the population, to bring the population down so that once winter starts, the number of deer that go into winter should all survive to the spring. Okay, that's the goal. All the deer in, all the deer out. Now, the whole point here is population control, right? Not extermination. So if you get a hunting license, you are allowed to shoot a male deer, a buck. Okay? However, they have a little lottery system up there. Now, I don't do this stuff. I just know about it. They have a little lottery system where if you get lucky enough, you can get a doe tag. So if you get a doe tag, you can put that up on top of your hunting license. And if you got a doe tag and you're out in the woods and you see a deer, bang, just shoot. You got it. It's yours. You can take anything you want. But if you do not have a doe tag, then you're out in the woods. You better be darn careful because if you shoot a doe and you get caught and you don't have a doe tag, that is huge fine, like 10 grand or more. So if you're a hunter, you've got to be awfully cautious. So what are you going to do? You're going to look at the world and say, okay, look, in the past, when a deer had antlers, it was a buck, and there was so many deer's antlers buck, deer antler buck, deer antler buck. Therefore, I believe if a deer has antlers, it's a buck. Okay, cool. So then one time, guy goes out there and shoots a deer, got himself antlers, 8 points, 8 points, okay, an 8 point deer. And what happens was when they drag it out of the woods, right? And you strap it to the hood of your car, honest to God, you take a giant dead animal and you hook it up to the front of your car. I don't know how people drive that way. Anyway, what happens then is the guy gets pulled over and the Department of Natural Resources officers, going around, sir, can I see your hunting license? Right? He's going around. He goes, sir, you don't have a doe tag. And the guy's like, what do you mean doe tag? Look, 8 points. It's a buck. It's a buck. And the DNR officer says, no, 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 no. It's missing the 1 point that would matter. It may well have 8 points on top, but it's missing 1 point below. 1 point. All right, whatever. I think my joke is funny. It's missing the one thing that would really make it a buck. You, in fact, have a doe with antlers. Oh, shit. What? 1,000,000,000 times we observed deer has antlers, it's a buck. Deer has antlers, it's a buck. Deer has antlers, it's a buck. Did you prove that if a deer has antlers, it's a buck? No, absolutely not. 1,000,000,000 positive observations will never prove anything. One false observation, and I disproved. Okay, look at that. I disproved if a deer has antlers, it's a buck. That's old hat. That ain't true. And so billions of positive observations prove nothing. One negative observation disproves. So that's the logic when I say you cannot prove anything in science, because it doesn't matter how many times you've seen something, you never know what the next one's going to look like. Okay, so be careful. Prove is a very dirty word in science. Okay, since we cannot prove, 5% margin of error is generally an accepted level. There are different situations that that level will be, but 5% is a common threshold of error that is used. Okay. So yeah, you can do that. So briefly, I'm going to talk a little bit about ethics before we wrap it up today, because this is a very important part of psychology. And I don't know if you were paying attention, because this beginning of the semester has been just, I admit, you guys got kawampod with lots of discussion posts right at the beginning and stuff. What's up, whoever is raising your hand? I didn't catch that. No, that somebody said something. There is an opportunity at some point here for you to get another extra credit opportunity. Opportunity for an extra credit opportunity. Yeah, interesting. That related to ethics. Since I'm doing ethics right now, let me just pull it up. Let me see if I have. I hope it's in there. Let me see. It's probably in here, right? No, it's not there. Is it? Oh, assignments. Assignments. No, I don't even have it. I'm gonna have to put it up. Where is it? I guess I don't have it. Oh, I better put that sucker up. There is a little online ethical training program. It's a little training program, and it gives you a little bit of exposure to the ethics of research. And it takes some time. I know it definitely takes some time, but I personally give extra credit for that thing in every single class that I teach. So you complete that assignment. I'll put it up there in that assignments folder. You complete that assignment, and I put you on a spreadsheet, and then every single semester you get. I start the semester by adding free points to people in my classes if they've done this training. So here's a couple of things about research, very very briefly, because So research at universities is very very tightly controlled, very very carefully controlled by the Institutional Review Board, the IRB. The IRB oversees research and determines the ethical nature of the research. And so anytime I want to do research, before I can start to gather any data, I must put together a proposal and send it to the Institutional Review Board for review. And they review it very carefully to see if I've done anything that might be sneaky and unethical. Okay. The IRB, Institutional Review Board, I'm actually a member of the IRB myself, and occasionally I review some work, but most of it gets done by, it's in the, Dr. Pugh is one of the members of the psychology department, and she oversees the IRB for Texas Wesleyan University. And a lot of different areas at our school, a lot of different faculty and students are doing research that must be reviewed. Obviously, psychology is a big one, but education, there's a lot of research that needs to be checked out. Over in business, they do quite a bit, especially in marketing. Oh, the biggest one for us though is the nurse anesthesia program. Oh my God, they do a lot of research that needs to be checked out. Okay, but some of the things that are involved in determining the ethics of research include things such as informed consent, and this is the idea that before you volunteer to participate in some research, you should be told everything about that thing. That is, everything I can tell you. Here is what you're going to do. Here's like how long it's going to take. This is the possible outcomes that could occur, things of that nature. Debriefing means after the research is complete, you have the right to know exactly what happened. And in research, and again, this could be medical research or psychological research, that the job of a researcher is to make sure that participants do not get harmed in any way, shape, or form. They are protected from harm. And finally, that there should be a guarantee of confidentiality. So if I'm asking you questions, maybe they're, how many drugs do you use, right? That I have, I am ensuring that your information will never be able to be put with your name. Okay? So there's a lot more to it, but for general sake, and this is some serious stuff. It's good. If you're doing research involving animals, then you have a different committee, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, the IACUC. IACUCs are hard to work with. I did my master's thesis with rats and my doctoral work with pigeons, so I have a lot of experience with IACUCs. And what's interesting is that the IRB is composed of university faculty members. The IACUC, though there are university faculty members on the committee, also includes citizens, like the old lady down the street, all right, just people that have no background in research, have no idea what's happening. And so your job is to write a proposal to describe your research to people that do not have a background in research and explaining what you want to do. And as you can imagine, they are very apprehensive. They do not like to give permission easily. Okay, but clearly there are incredibly strict laws when working with animal participants, protecting from harm. I mean, you cannot just randomly harm an animal, period. You just can't. Okay, adequate housing. Oh my goodness, the housing on an animal, care for the animal. I mean, at one time, like I said, I was doing my PhD work with pigeons, and one day I went in and I had 6 pigeons, right? And you test the same 6 pigeons all the time. One pigeon died; it was dead one day. Oh God! So I had to order a pigeon. It was awesome. They got these catalogs. You're going through the catalog and you find your pigeon. Okay? The pigeon was like $50. Okay, it wasn't very much money. Shipping $500. $50 pigeon sounds like something you buy on eBay, right? $50 pigeon, 500 shipping. Oh, but then the real fun starts because the pigeon has to be quarantined at the university hospital. And that pigeon will be inspected every single day by a veterinarian. Okay. And so by the time I got that dumb pigeon in for my research, it had my $50 pigeon ended up costing close to $2,000 because you have such rigid rules about how you treat them, what medical care they receive, what kind of housing they're held in. Animal research is in some ways more rigidly controlled than human research. All right, so that's what I got to say. I got the research done in one day because I know it's not a fun topic. I dig that. So on Thursday, we're going to get some cool stuff. All right. We're going to start to talk a little bit about the brain. We're going to talk a little bit about neurology. We're going to talk a little bit about how neurons work. It's going to be amazing how much of what we are is going on up here in our brains. Okay. So we got any questions today before we log her off and move on? Any thoughts? Remember, like I said, the chapter 2 quiz and the chapter 3 discussion forum are tomorrow night. Okay. All right. So yeah, by the way, I put a lot of zeros in the grade book this morning. I did not want to do that, but there's just nothing in there. So these things aren't that complicated, y'all. I don't take that much time. Okay. So don't be a zero, dude. Be a winner. Okay. Well, then I am going to log her off and I will see y'all on Wednesday. All right.